Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Mud's Women, which is episode 4 of season 1 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek, the original series, covering the whole show, one episode at a time. In this video I will cover Mud's Women. So Mud's Women is the episode in which Kirk encounters a ship that's being not responding, is being illegal, and is trying to hide from them, and the ship is destroyed, but they manage to save the crew, which consists of Harry Mudd, a con man who tries to swindle his way on the ship, but he doesn't get very far though, and he also has a group of passengers, 3 women who have these magical powers to attract and entice men, and Harry Mudd, when the Enterprise runs out of dilithium, they go to a dilithium mining facility, and Harry Mudd tries to con the men into getting his women as wives in order to set him free. But eventually, it all works out. The women get their husbands, and the Enterprise gets their dilithium, and they go on their merry way. Now, they actually call it lithium, not dilithium, but I'm, clarifying because that, of course, is what it will be known going forward in future Trek, which makes sense because lithium is something totally different than dilithium, which is fictional. So, okay, so I don't like Harry Mudd, and I don't like this episode. Now, Harry Mudd appears way too much in Star Trek, but so this version of Harry Mudd will appear one more time in the original series in the episode I, Mudd, and then of course the same voice actor, I believe, returns to do Harry Mudd in the animated series episode Mudd's Passion, and then in Discovery, many years later, Harry Mudd will be played by a different actor, Rainn Wilson, in 2 episodes of Discovery. I believe one is Choose Your Pain, and the other is Madness to Make the Darkest... Was it something magic to make the darkest man go? I can't remember what the fuck it's called. But anyway, whatever that episode is called. The one with the time loop. 2 episodes of Discovery. And I don't like Harry Mudd. I don't like pretty much any of those episodes. The Discovery one with the time loop is probably my favorite. But the way they play Harry Mudd is completely different than how he's portrayed here in the original series. That might be why. And out of the original series appearances, Mudd is the only one I somewhat like. I can tolerate that episode. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a good episode, but it's okay. I can tolerate it. Whereas Mud's Women and Mud's Passion and Choose Your Pain, but for that matter, are crap. And I don't like it. And I think Mud's Women and Mud's Passion by far are the worst, though. Because they both play on that sort of sex appeal, sexy thing, which, yeah. Now, Mud's Women was originally supposed to be, like, Gene Roddenberry pitched this as one of the ideas for the second pilot. If you remember, like, The Cage got rejected, and they were going to do a second pilot because, NBC gave them another shot, and so they had several ideas for this new pilot, and one of them was the one that Gene Roddenberry wanted to do was this episode, Mud's Women, and luckily the smarter, cooler heads prevailed, and they went with Where No Man Has Gone Before, something I already covered, which is kind of a lackluster episode itself, but nowhere near as bad as this, and it wouldn't really be a very accurate portrayal of... I think it would be a terrible idea for a pilot. Now, Roddenberry is notorious for being sort of obsessed with sex appeal and showing sex on TV on his shows. I won't even get into what he said about the Ferengi. Maybe I'll get into that, or what he tried to do with the Ferengi, but maybe I'll get into that when I cover Next Generation. Point is, this is kind of his sort of field. Now, I'm not that familiar with other shows of the 60s, so maybe this is what they did in this episode is a common trope, and it's like something that TV shows in the 60s did a lot, because the more I look into some of these other Trek episodes, the more I realize it's just what a lot of other shows were doing at the time as well. But the whole thing with this episode is when the women beam aboard the Enterprise, immediately all of the men are like lack-jawed, staring, going, and even Spock, I was kept an eye out, particularly on Spock, to see how he would behave in this episode, and he too was like kind of in awe and lackluster and like, oh my god, women. Now, he wasn't as bad as McCoy and Scotty, who like couldn't barely even move, and when Harry Mudd said something to McCoy, he completely ignored him, and he's like, yes, they are, thinking of the women, because he's so entranced with the women. Now, I know that the storyline is that they're taking these crystals that are supposed to make them emit beauty. But the crystals are kind of revealed as a sham, and I'll cover that later. So that is no excuse for why the men are behaving the way they are. And plus, it's like they don't see women on a daily basis, because there's plenty of women who serve on the Enterprise, and plus they're scantily clad as well. So I don't know why they would be so like unable to move and so jarring just because they see three hot chicks. And not to be rude, because these women are, not to demean them in any way, because they are attractive, but they're not that hot. I've definitely seen hotter, and so it's really hard for me to buy. And more than that. In fact, I probably shouldn't even mention that, because that's not really the point. The point is that the men are professionals. Like, these are Starfleet officers who've been trained. They went through years of the academy. They've serviced in space. They're very professional. The fact that they would sit there and go, just because three hot chicks, regardless, they could be super, super hot. Maybe they're as hot as you could possibly get. That is still impossible to buy. that these men would just be going, oh my god, and not even be able to operate standard things and not pay attention to anything. It's like I half expected them, like the eyes to go out of their head like Bugs Bunny or some shit. Now, here's what I was thinking when I was watching this episode. Is this really how men behaved when they saw hot chick in the 60s? Or, and this I think is more likely, is this how TV portrayed how men behaved when they saw hot women? Because I think it's that second one. I don't think anyone, even in the 60s, really behaved this way. And we're like so like slack-jawed and like, oh my god, it's a hot chick, I can't move. And then there's this other helmsman dude who, I can't remember his name, I think he only appears in this episode, who does that multiple times throughout this episode. He's just like, I can't move, and Sulu has to like do it for him, and then Sulu's kind of making a lot of jokes like, oh my god, look, these women are so hot. And yes, Spock several times throughout the episode, like when Kirk first meets the women, and he's like, oh, taken aback. Maybe Kirk doesn't act as slack-jawed and incapacitated as the other men do, but still, it's bad enough. And when the women leave Kirk's room, Spock gives them this look like, you see that? Oh my god. I could not imagine Tuvok behaving this way. And any Vulcan, any Star Trek show that came out at post-60s, behaving this way. They would just be like, alright, I could picture Tuvok on the Voyager and these hot women be on board, and Harry, Kim, and Chakotay were like, oh my god, hot women. And Tuvok would just be like, do your duty. Stop fucking staring. And in fact, I couldn't even imagine Chakotay doing that. Maybe Harry Kim. Maybe Tom Paris is better. Harry Kim and Tom Paris staring. And then Tuvok, oh god, rolling his eyes and being completely unaffected, which is exactly how Spock should have been portrayed in this episode. But even so, like, having Scotty and McCoy being like so dumbstruck and dumbfounded, like, ugh, I do not buy for a millisecond. I think this is a TV trope. That is my ultimate conclusion. I don't think this is how men behaved in the 60s. I think this is a poorly written TV trope. Period. And then, so I guess I'll get into Harry Mudd. Who is supposed to be the swindler, and he's like supposed to swindle and lie and sort of exaggerate, and I guess I don't hate him too much in this episode. I hate like sort of the point of the episode more, really, is that he because when he has that battle of wits with the computer, and the computer just calls him on all of his lies. Actually, that I kind of like that aspect of it. That was kind of cool, but the fact how he gets the women to, like, you know, seduce the men because they're all, you know, dumbfounded and idiots around them, to, you know, learn all the information he needs to know, and so his women tell him about it, and he's able to call the miners and circumvent Kirk's authority and get the miners to provide Kirk with an ultimatum to set Harry Mudd free. If they didn't, they don't get the dilithium crystals that they need. And I didn't like, and I don't know, I just find Harry Mudd annoying. Like, it's almost like a 60s, like, swindler cliche that I think is outdated. And the way he has like this thick, I believe it's an Irish accent, correct me if I'm wrong, and constantly like you know, oh, I'm just Harry Mudd, I'm just blah, 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 and this swarmy way of behaving, which seems like it's a TV trope that's outdated to me. It's something that I don't know. I don't think really works, and I don't think it works here in this episode. So that's Harry Mudd. And so the other point I was going to make is the dilithium crystals go out pretty fucking easily. They seem pretty useless in this episode. Now, granted, Episode 4, this is the 4th episode of Star Trek ever made, the 3rd for this version of Star Trek. So no lore things have been established, and of course they changed that later on to make the dilithium crystals a bit sterner, which they kind of had to because the whole ship would be useless if they were put out as easily as they did in this episode. So that's my point. Regardless of whether or not canon had been created, it's kind of unbelievable that something that drives the ship, something that the ship is very dependent on, would break that easily. That's not practical, and so it makes sense that they did change this going forward, because this doesn't make any sense. It's such plot contrivance. Alright, so now let me get into the whole it was a placebo thing. Now, I think I misunderstood this when I covered this for my season-long review, and in fact, every time I watch this, because I didn't pay much attention to this episode, I haven't seen it that many times, because I don't like it. But watching it now, and oh god, it is a slog to get through. I mean, I will say this, the first half of the episode at least held my attention, but then once they get to the mining colony and they're like, the women are dancing with the miners, and you had that one miner who's like having arguments with the woman, and then like, ooh, and he's being a dick to her. Like, I got so bored. I'm like, this is so boring. When will this episode fucking be over? It went from like annoying, but at least held my attention, to boring and annoying. Anyway, so anyway, placebo. So At the end of the episode, it's revealed that one of the, I can't even remember her name. I don't remember the names, but one of the blonde woman, who was like kind of the main character, she's like looks ugly, and the miner guy is like, "Oh, you look ugly, and I don't like you." And Harry Mudd reveals about the Venus crystals, I believe there were, and he's like, "Oh, this is all a lie, it's all a drug." And then Kirk says, "Here, take one." So he gives her one, and she takes it, and she instantly looks beautiful again because the lighting, and all of a sudden she has makeup on which she didn't have before, and the lighting is better, and the music is more sexy, and she goes and she talks in a softer voice all of a sudden, and so she's sexy again. And she goes up to the man, "Is this what you want, all sexy?" And then Kirk reveals, "Well, that was just a colored gelatin I gave you. That's not Harry Mudd's drugs." And this is where I think I was mistaken, because I think I was under the impression that it was a placebo the entire time. But what this scene is actually implying is just what Kirk gave her in this one instance was a placebo. So I'm very unclear on what they're saying. So was there an actual drug that Harry Mudd was giving them? But if that's the case, how come when Kirk gave her the placebo, it acted in the same way that the drug did, which kind of implies that the drug itself is a placebo. But that wouldn't make any sense, because earlier we see, when the women walk by McCoy's medical scanner, it starts going crazy and nuts, and McCoy again is acting all slacked all. Like, why is it doing that? Why is he acting like he's drugged out in this episode? I don't know. But anyway, and so that kind of implies that there is a drug if it's making the machines act all weird, and of course the fact that the men are all turn into mushy idiots kind of implies there's an actual drug. But if there is an actual drug, how come a placebo had the exact same effect as the actual drug? So either way, this whole placebo thing doesn't make any fucking sense. It is a stupid reveal. I don't know why it's there. It's just there to confuse things. And then I think the episode ends, and Kirk is like arguing with these miners, and they're arguing over dilithium, but the episode ends with the miners taking the women as wives anyway, but somehow Harry Mudd is not exonerated, and he has to go to trial. Like, I don't know, maybe I missed something because I was so bored with this fucking episode I stopped paying attention. But I don't know, like, that doesn't seem like it concluded. The whole story is sloppy. It doesn't make any sense. The characters act like morons. This is a terrible episode. I can't believe that Gene Roddenberry wanted to make this the pilot. Oh my god, that really speaks to Roddenberry. It really does. Anyway, he's not the genius a lot of people hold him up to be. So, my rating for Mudd's Women, out of 10, is a 2, extremely poor. Now, I think originally I had given this episode a 4, and maybe I downgraded it to a 3, but after watching it now, it's definitely a 2. It is not a good episode. It was extremely poorly written. It doesn't make any sense. The characters act like morons, and even if you use the excuse, oh, they're just affected by this drug, it's still doesn't work because they're inconsistent with is it a drug or is it a placebo? And if it's a placebo, why they? I don't know. I don't even want to talk about this dumb episode anymore. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. As always, as a new feature on my channel, I want to give a shout out to all the Patreon supporters who support the channel. Thank you so much for your support. We have Anthony Dinabictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joe Aviles, Brian A, Alessandro Michelaccio, I'm sorry, I'm going to get this right eventually. Norman Buckwell, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon House. Thank you so much for your support. And if you would like to support Enchantment of Eternity, you can have early access to certain videos. You can have revisited series where I cover the episodes I had already reviewed, and I revisit them exclusively for Patreon supporters, and many more perks. You can click the link in the description below and support me on Patreon. Any support you give is very much appreciated. Coming up next, I believe I'm reviewing the next episode of Prodigy on Thursday, but on Saturday, I'm back here with another new review for The Enemy Within. Oh my god. Another outdated, cringy episode I'm not really looking forward to talking about, but that's the original series for you, I guess. Anyway, be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek videos. I keep covering the original series and other shows as well, like Prodigy. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.